Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else. We have episode 8 or 7. I think it's 8, right?
9.
9.
It's
Wow.
9.
9 of
Oh, we're almost done.
the Salty Triangle podcast. It's good to see everybody. It's been a little while.
He says on an audio-only format.
Hey, it's
good to hear everyone.
It's good. Yeah, that's just cringe. So. Today we will be talking about a pretty decisive topic. It's about how anime maintains the status quo and if it does at all. Yeah, we can get right into what we've been watching.
Who wants to start?
Well, these days I really only watch what we watch with the group watch. So I've been watching since last time Neon Genesis Evangelion, Pew Pew Molka, and I've just recently on Monday finished Flip Flappers. So those are 3 interesting anime, I'd say. I mean, Pew Pew Molka we've discussed before, especially Pory really recommended it as the best anime of the season, the year,
All time. That's
all
fair.
time.
Wow.
Well, I wouldn't give it that much praise, but I would certainly say it's a very fun watch, especially for an anime that's just 40 minutes in total. It's really easy to watch. It's nothing groundbreaking, I'd say, but it's not. It's also not the kind of comedy that makes me laugh out loud, like constantly. But it's fun and enjoyable, and it just puts a smile on your face watching it. I mean, and have you had further considerations on this anime, Pory, or as your...
As artistic as it is, and as much as there is to, ponder over, I can't say that I've had too much thought about Molka.
No. It's just a fun stop-motion series. Unlike that, the other 2 anime that I watched have...
off the wall.
Especially considering the consideration that you can put into that. Neon Genesis Evangelion has been a series that is like a cult classic from the 90s. So
It's not just a cult classic, it's just straight up a classic.
Yeah, it's just...
It is. Yeah, it's a classic.
It's organized religion classic.
Yeah, before anime took off, when... around the time when Speedy started being or really gotten big into anime, and by that time I'd already been an anime fan for like 5 to 6 years. It was one of those animes that everyone should have watched at least once. That was a thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That unofficial list of anime that were like, if you are an anime fan, you need to watch them, or you need to have already watched them if you want to call yourself an anime fan. And Neon Genesis Evangelion was like right at the top of this list next to Cowboy Bebop.
And I can see why. I can definitely see why. Even from a standpoint of just leaving out all of the psychological stuff that you can think about, all the many messages it might portray.
Okay, but stop. Before we go too far into this, Speedy, you haven't watched End of Evangelion.
I have,
right?
I have.
Oh, you have?
I have.
Okay, never mind then. Go on.
Even from just a perspective of a story that is fun to watch, it is very good. I genuinely found myself enjoying the show a lot. But I mean, the last 2 episodes were a little weird. Pory, you haven't watched it, right?
Well, I watched the 5 episodes and then I fell unconscious, so I had to stop watching. But
yeah, so I mean, you're going to watch it anyway. Do you? I really want to talk about it. but
I don't
I
care.
also don't want to.
Yeah, I don't
you don't care?
I
Okay,
don't care.
okay. Because Shayla definitely has watched it. We've talked about it before.
Several times over.
Um, there, it's an enjoyable story on itself, but I think both its greatest strength, especially for people to like share ideas about it, is because there's so many things in it. But it's also its greatest weakness, because I have a feeling that it's a hot pot of different ideas, and there's never a theory, I think, that can take every single thing in the show and make it make sense. Like, there's multiple theories that you can come up with that say, okay, this is what the show is about. This is what the message that the show wants to.
Oh no!
bring
You
across.
absolutely 100% can, but you need to have read a lot of psychology to do that. Like a lot of psychology, mostly Freudian psychology, but lots of type psychology.
So there,
lots of psychology.
It's the same. It's again a Ghost in the Shell thing, where if
Yes.
you haven't read up on it, you might just miss the point. You say.
Yeah, kind of. It's not so much. No. It's not so much of you might miss the point, because the thing about Evangelion is, like you said, it's a huge hot pot of ideas, right? The difference is that, like, there are hot pots that are just, like, have all kinds of random things thrown in it, and then there are hot pots where, like, you are very selective with the things that are thrown into it, and they all are, each and every single one of them is in there for a certain specific reason, making it all work together. Evangelion is the second one, right? It's not just a hot mishmash of ideas, it is a mishmash of ideas that were selected very carefully for very specific reasons to give a very specific product in the end.
So, I watched this with at least one other guy who said that he had his own idea about the show. I haven't actually inquired what it is, because I was very tired by the time he said it, and I was like, I don't want to get into his theories right now. I want to go to bed. But my theory on what the show is trying to tell is it's trying to give a warning about about the dangers of entrusting everything to the youth of a civilization, of a society, and laying all of that on them, and having them basically ignoring the innocence of the youth in favor of making them take part in society. And it's in that context, it's pretty depressing, because the show tries to say this is what happens when you ignore it, and it's pretty gruesome what they have to go through, and what society or makes them do. So, I mean, do we have to explain what Neon Genesis Evangelion is about at this point?
I mean, in all honesty, I think we kind of do, because, since Attack on Titan, there have been, like, a lot. Since Attack on Titan, you have this huge amount of modern-day anime fans who, don't really talk about or never have even heard about, the classics that were everywhere, that everyone's heard of since, when we first started.
Right, so Neon Genesis Evangelion is, on the surface, a pretty well animated mecha show. There's a lot more to it, of course. A guy goes to see his father after a long time, picked up by some hot girl, and is promptly told to enter the mecha to fight off some fuck off big other mecha alien kind of thing. And that's kind of what he then is forced to do. He doesn't like doing it. He doesn't want to do it. But the expectation of having to do it because no one else can it makes him do it anyway. It's like he's got a bit of a complex towards his father, and his father is the whole the leader of the whole project. That tries to fight off these alien robots, which are called angels, and through that he meets the team that works on this project, and other pilots, and it gets more and more depressing as time goes on. Though I was always dreading watching this, because I don't like depressing shit, because it always just jumps over into my own psyche if I watch really depressing shit. It's just it.
And you don't like mechas.
And I don't like mechas, but I actually didn't mind as much this time. I found myself not caring that it was a mecha show in Neon Genesis Evangelion. I don't exactly know why yet. Probably will find out the answer eventually. Because it's not because it's well animated well enough. Because I mean, Darling in the
because
Franxx
the mechas don't really look like mechas. I think that's the big reason why. They look like large humans almost. They're very, very organically designed. There's
That's
none
true.
of the boxiness that you dislike in like some of the Pokemon designs, for example.
Yeah.
Or many of the mecha designs in, let's say, Code Geass. They're very very organic, human, almost human, beast-like shaped.
They're also not quite just tools. They're not oversized guns. There's a lot more to the Evas, as they're called, those mechs that they ride. The kind of scale of the battles that they fight becomes greater and greater until basically the whole of humanity is hanging in the balance of one teenage boy, depressed and almost unwilling to do anything because it's meaningless to himself. This struggle that, in all honesty, he should not be the one struggling for all of humanity. He should not be the one. And I was like, at a certain point, he decided to like run away halfway through the show. And I was like, you do it. Or maybe near the end, just do it. Just run away. This is not your responsibility. You should not. These kinds of expectations should never be forced upon you. And if society has to run on just you having to do something that you never wanted, then you should just leave it. Even if society would crumble without you taking that role, because that's not how it's supposed to be. But that's also like, I mean, it's easy to say that for a story, but when you juxtapose that, when you parallel that to actual society, it's a little bit more nuance, of course. But in the show, I was like, please run away. This is you should not be doing this. But he did anyway. He did it. He went into the mecha. I mean, what are you? When's it been that you watched it, Sheila?
The last time I watched it actually was when Jake came to visit. So in the summer of, what do we have now, 2021, 2020? Summer of 2019 was the last time I watched it.
Quite recent then. Should be fresh in your memory.
Recent-ish. And I also actually did, we often had to do the dissertations and argumentations in history of art class. And our last final big project was we each were allowed to choose a picture. Like our history of art teacher gave us like a huge selection of pictures. And we had to write basically like a huge argumentation on it. And I got a lot of philosophy that I took out of the picture, that I interpreted into the picture, actually out of, for one, Mob Psycho 100, and two, Neon Genesis Evangelion. And I dived a lot, and I mean a lot into, the symbolism, the research, the psychology, all of that behind Neon Genesis Evangelion. So that's where I learned quite a bit of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everything you're saying is correct, Speedy. And you would not believe...
I don't hear that often from you.
Yes, but also you would not believe how incredibly surface level everything that you said is.
I mean, yeah, I figured, because this is just from a perspective of someone who watched the show once and was like, okay, well, this is cool. I have no idea what to think about this. There is a lot in this show, and I've forgotten like a quarter of it by the time it ended, so I don't have all the pieces in my mind left to puzzle it all together correctly.
There's just so much information there too that you not even I was able to retain it all in first glance. First watch.
So
I'm still not quite able to retain it all. The first time I watched it, I was like 15 years old or something, 14, 15, something along those lines. I came out of this being like, okay, that was underwhelming.
I think my takeaway, the message that I just explained about, expectations on the youth, that kind of thing, first fermented itself into my mind when I thought to myself, watching the show, this world should not exist. And then that opinion, that view on the show kind of snowballed out of there. What's your...
Well, do you know how the Avas exactly how they operate? And why it is the children that have to be the pilots, and why everything is put on their backs.
I think it's better if you, because this is a question where I'm supposed to answer, and I probably get it wrong, and then you explain to me
that was a yes/no question. Do you or do you not?
I do not anymore. Maybe I would have if I had just come out of watching the show, but I don't anymore. My memory is not that good.
Well, the other thing is, like, they never stated. There's a lot of stuff in there that they don't state outright, that you have to pay, like, stupidly high attention to. Pory, are you still there?
I'm listening and
okay.
etc.
That you have to pay, like, a stupid amount of attention to, because it's, like, just background noise sometimes where they explain it or where they talk about it, and you have to kind of piece together what it is. So I don't think they ever explain exactly how the EVAs work, but you can kind of piece it together if you pay enough attention. And that is that the EVAs only work by having a soul implanted into them, right?
Yes.
And they do that with the soul of the children's mothers, the people who have... not entirely certain if the ladies volunteered for it or what's going on exactly, with the exception of Rei, Ayanami Rei, because, she's not a real human being. And so, her original clone part, so to speak, was put into, Unit 00. Unit 01 is, of course, Shinji's mom. And Unit 02 is Asuka's mom, who, is still alive at the very beginning, but, basically a wreck at that point. Or maybe she's not alive. Maybe it's just, her imagining that her mother's still alive. It's kind of open in the air. Yeah. So the only ones who can pilot them are, the children of the EVAs, which ties directly back to what the Human Instrumentality Project is all about. It's not about fighting the angels. Nobody cares about fighting the angels, except for, the actual people in the working for, NERV. But, like, the headshots at NERV don't care about the angels. Their entire thing is the Human Instrumentology Project, which basically, wants to reduce everything to a state of nothingness because, and here's where we get into the Freudian psychology, where we feel safest and where, we all always desire to go back to, according to Freud in German. How would you even say that? Pronounce it in English? Freud?
Freud.
Okay.
just say it in German. That's the correct way.
Freud is that all humans have an innate longing to go back to the womb of the mother. And once you know that, all of a sudden, a lot of things in Evangelion make a lot more sense. Of course, that's still...
Is that why it fills up with liquid?
Still only very, very baseline shallow, but Pory, say what it is that you wanted to say.
That's why it fills up with liquid. I was confused. I was like...
Yeah, it's
I get it now! I was like, why?
Yes, they are basically, like literally bathed in, what is a substitute for the water, the womb water. That's what they're fighting in. And, they are fighting, within the souls, within the bodies of, their souls put into the bodies of the Evas. The Evas themselves actually are also angels, especially Unit 001, or 01. It's just like this whole mess, and then, at the very end, they return to nothingness. It's because, like, within the womb, even if you're still, like, if there's still a conscience there, you don't really, like, feel anything or notice anything going on. It's this almost like you're in suspended animation a little bit, right? So, Gendo Ikari and everybody, who is on the board of NERV got the Human Instrumentality Project going, to go back to that, using Shinji and, his longing for his mother. So they used him specifically as the catalyst to, be the quote-unquote God or decision maker or Jesus, whatever it is you want to call him, because there's a whole bunch of Christian lore in there too. I'm not going into that. Like, we could make a whole episode just on Evangelion.
I don't want to spend. I don't want to spend an hour on Evangelion. So.
So I'm just going to finish with that and let you all know that this is just the very, very, very baseline of the show. Taking his longing for his mother and trusting in that he would make the decision to have everything basically go into a goo and have everybody be one big collective consciousness, which then he didn't do because ironically all of the experiences that he had made at NERF made him understand how important individuality is, despite the fact that he had always hated and hated, but at the same time longed and had all of these conflicting feelings about individuality. And now we get into another type of philosophy and psychology that, like I said, we're not going into, because it all connects to one another. The more you know, the more the show makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I guess I can see why. I guess I can see why.
So every single time I've watched it, it's just been getting better and better to me. And now, the last time I watched it in 2019 together with Jake, I was just mind blown. It's been 4 years or so since I watched it since then. I was just mind blown at how much attention to detail and how much research and just how much of everything is in this fucking show. It's people praise it and love it for a reason.
Mm-hmm. So there's one thing, the characters, I find them good characters, but there's no characters that I like. I think it would be very, very good to say, very correct to say that none of the characters are good people. No,
that's not correct. Every single one of the characters are people. That's the problem.
I was about to go as most people are. No person is actually a good person. They are a person capable of good and evil. And they are very nuanced, and I think that's a very strong point for Neon Genesis Evangelion.
But it also makes sense, that is a fact that turns a lot of people off, because, it made they are very, very realistic characters, but realistic characters don't always make for good storytelling and for good, especially not for good entertainment. So not everybody is going to be on board with the nuance and the lack of simplicity, because whenever you tell a story, it's usually a simplified version of or a simplified version of reality of what we know. And so taking that complexity and putting it into story does turn a lot of people off, and that's one of the reasons why Evangelion, for how praised it is just as much controversial.
Yeah. So one thing I would definitely want to touch on, though, what is up with, especially in the past, the internet's obsession with Asuka?
She's a tsundere.
She was waifu number one in the early.
She's a tsundere.
In the early. I don't get it. I see why she is a good character. She is a wonderfully crafted character. But why the fuck would you want her as a waifu?
Because she's a tsundere. That is what I have been asking myself every single time. You're oh, I love Eloise. Louise from Zero no Tsukaima. Oh, I love
Based.
Taiga. Oh, I love Rin. Oh, I love all of these tsundere characters. I'm why do people like them?
I mean,
they're fucking hot. Duh.
Fuck that.
No, but this is different. This is not a. All those other characters are a cartoonish portrayal of a girl, whereas Asuka is very much a brat. She is a brat.
People are into that.
Like every other tsundere.
Yes, but she is very due to how well the characterization Evangelion is. She is very realistically a brat. She is very emotionally traumatized. And
People are into that.
I mean, it wasn't just her, there was pretty much the first waifu war going on between her and Rei.
Yeah,
they were
exactly.
Both huge.
But both of them are, I don't know.
But like,
man.
if you're a teenager, that's like, whatever show makes
Maybe-
the most impact is you're gonna imprint on those
Maybe a lot of the people that watched it when it came out in the early 2000s.
Well, I don't even think that.
as
I think it's
well,
just that
that
when
they-
you
they-
get into anime, people are like, yeah, you should watch this, and then they watch it and they go, wow, I like this Asuka character, and then they just stick around.
I think they might have empathized with Shinji, which, I mean,
No,
that's-
everybody hated Shinji.
I mean, do I hate him? No.
Yeah, but Shinji was one of the most hated characters in anime for like a decade.
But, I mean, he's a wimp, but he is a very troubled teenager, as a lot of teenagers are.
Who also masturbates to an unconscious
Yeah.
girl.
Oh God! The moment that happened, I was like, "Oh, fuck! Why?"
And do you understand exactly what Misato did to get him in the robot that one last time?
I mean, she promised to have sex with him.
Exactly. That was his motivation.
Fuck! It was like, and then she died, like almost
And then she died.
and then seconds after he left. She knew she was going to die. He probably knew she was going to die, but it was enough.
But yeah, it's for reasons like that. It's like Shinji doesn't get into the robot unless there's sex involved.
I mean, he's not just
a troubled. Yes, but he's not just a troubled teenager. He's also like the. Okay, another thing is, like when you said that, it was great that he was running away and you were rooting for him.
Mm.
You think it was an accident that they chose to have him like leave on a train?
No, because they can
Yeah.
just manipulate that, right? What?
Nobody can manipulate that. He was literally just, I don't want to, because he never decides anything for himself.
That is true.
He is incapable of deciding anything for himself. Even for instance, when he runs away, he gets on a train and lets the train decide for him where he goes next. That the train in and of itself is a metaphor for how Shinji lives his life, never doing any decisions of himself.
See, this is why I don't like trains, because they decide for me where. No.
I mean, yeah, in that case, it's a metaphor. But yeah, so there are a lot of reasons why people like Shinji. It's not just because he wouldn't get in the robot, which, is like the biggest anime meme out there is get in the robot, Shinji.
Yeah. Though I don't think it's actually been said once in that exact way.
Oh, it has been in the dub.
Because through the entire anime, I was just waiting for that one defining sentence, get in the robot, Shinji, and it didn't happen. So I guess it's because of the dub. I guess it's because of the dub.
Also, in all honesty, if you had told me that you were watching it, I would have suggested that you watch the dub because the dub is fabulous. Like, it's fabulous. Anyways, that's not the only reason. Like, yeah, that's, what everybody says it is, because he's a wimp who won't get in the robot and won't do the cool things that everybody else wants to do. But that's really not the reasons why people dislike him. It's because he was deliberately written to be, as dissociative as possible. He won't make any decisions for himself. He, will let other people push him around. He is very easily influenced by, whatever the characters around him, what their state of mind is. And literally until the very end, like the last 2 episodes or end of Evangelion, that is the very first time he makes a decision for himself. So, the wimpiness of, him, he's crying and whining about the state of affairs all the time, but literally not once will do something about it.
Yeah.
Put that together with, him lusting over girls, but also having that, that very much, I'm one of the good guys vibe, it's like, girls don't want to go with good guys, and I'm one of the good guys kind of a people.
The nice guy, the nice guy.
Yeah, the nice guys, who then ends up, masturbating to an unconscious girl in the hospital. That kind of makes him kind of, difficult to appreciate, let's put it that way.
I mean, I don't. I think they're good characters. I don't know if I like any of the characters.
In all honesty,
there's a
I very
difference-
much like Asuka.
I mean,
I didn't like her at first, like the first 2 times I watched it, because, tsundere, brats. I'm just generally not a fan of tsunderes or brats. or tsunderes because they are brats. But Asuka I ended up liking when I watched End of Evangelion, and it felt like, like the crown to her development, going back to, like, she's figured it out, right? She knows what's going on, she knows who she is now, she knows, what's going on around her, she knows what she's fighting for, when at first, just like Shinji, she was incapable of making any decisions for herself, and only did, what the people around her told her. Even though it doesn't come off that way because she has all of that temperament, Asuka is, like, a very, very interesting character because she suffers, at the same time, she suffers from an inferiority complex and a superiority complex at the exact same fucking time, which is, like, really, really interesting. And she masks all of that with, like, that mask of, of I am better than you, that tsundere mask, right? Except that it's not a normal tsundere mask because it's not the, don't think that I like you or anything, because she actually really does not like Shinji, and she never quite warms up to it, even if they have these little, sexual curiosity interactions once in a while.
She wants a person like the adult guy that she's, like, very much interested in to be interested in her, and she wants that out of Shinji, but she also knows that Shinji just isn't going to be that kind of person because that's not who Shinji is. But she wants him to be like that, but he isn't.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not entirely certain.
I mean,
it's a very possible and very legit interpretation. I
would like to say, by the way, that's not actually something I came up with. I feel like Digi once made a video about Asuka and how she, as a tsundere, differs very much from all the other tsunderes because...
Yeah, I thought I'd heard that before.
Yeah, to reiterate that particular point.
I mean, that is, like I said, that is very, very much definitely a very valid reading. It's not one that I know I agree with. Like, I'd have to watch the series again because, like I said, there's just so much in there. And last time, I was just a bit, like, overwhelmed with knowing, like, now that I've made all of that, like, those dozens of hours of research into the show, into the psychology, into the Christianity, into the symbolism, into all of that behind it, like how much of it I could actually see and take in. So I'd have to watch it again and pay a bit more attention to the characters to know if I agree with that or not. But it is definitely a very valid interpretation.
Yeah, to reiterate the point that he made real quick, is that, at least what the big thing that I took away from that video, tsunderes nowadays are created for the main character to change, whereas Asuka is kind of the opposite, where she requires the main character to change to fit her. And I feel like that's a much more interesting approach to the tsundere type. And I guess it also shows why Asuka is a much more interesting character than most other tsunderes, because most other tsunderes are tools for the main character to play around with and then mold them into what they want their ideal waifu to be, whereas the other way around is much more difficult to write, and
I mean,
it requires a main character like Shinji.
Yeah, Asuka is... I almost would not, like... The only reason really she's classified as a tsundere is because of her fiery temper, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, she doesn't really have any of the dairy.
No.
She's like all tsun, and the tsun comes from, like masking her own complexes. And under the tsun, she's just a huge mess of a person that has absolutely no idea what to do with herself. That, like, at towards the end of the show, literally withers away in a broken bathtub in a broken house. Because that's just the perfect representation of, how much of a mess she is underneath that mask of the tsun that she puts on. So, but, she was also the first, like, before that. I mean, you kind of have, like, Urusei Yasura, who has a bit of a, like, tsundere stereotype, the hot and cold. But, it's very, very obvious that all of the tsunderes coming after are very much modeled on Asuka. But Asuka is not a tsundere in that she has a tsun and then she has the dere, and the dere needs to come out, right? She is a tsundere in that it just feels that way because of her temperament, and that's it.
I feel like it started like that all the people that watched Neon Genesis Evangelion were like, I want to create a character like that, and they made a character like that.
No, duh.
But devoid, away from the context that Asuka is in, her character works very differently. Or the
It's
character,
not just
the
Asuka.
character
Like
type,
literally every single character in that show.
Yeah, would not
Absolutely
work in another
every single
show.
one of every single one of them has been taken and redone, right? And in tropes. There's not a single character in that show that you haven't seen in a show after with that, like, having that specific trope of them. Whether it be, the horrible dad, whether it be Rey, like, Rey herself has, like, some kind of trope to it. What was it called? Do you remember? Like, the
Kudere.
unemotional girl?
Kudere.
Yeah, Kudere. Misato, like, the sexy, the sexy older woman, the teacher.
One-san,
I think,
the sexy
yeah,
One-san.
or even the teacher stereotype. I'm pretty sure it came out of Misato. But
I
also the
guess,
girl boss stereotype.
Yeah.
Even like many of the side characters and a lot of the visuals too. I mean, SAO. You would be surprised how many shots SAO ripped straight out of Evangelion.
I can believe it.
That show changed the landscape, not just of anime, but of all, audiovisual media across the world. Like, you have no idea how big the influences of it are.
I definitely believe it. But I want to move on to the last show that at least that I watched. Flip Flappers, which... Oh boy, what to say about that? So
I don't know shit about it. No spoilers.
Yeah. Oh, no spoilers.
Is there anything you would spoil? I mean, I guess. There's actually a lot you could spoil. Never mind.
There is a lot you can spoil. It's a very confusing show. It's another one of those shows where I feel like it wants to do a lot with metaphors and symbolism, and it takes the characters to a sort of semi-parallel world. I don't even understand exactly how it works. And through all the things that happen in that world, it likes to dive into the characters through symbolism and metaphors and other stuff. But the whatever happens in those worlds doesn't really have much of an impact.
No, that's not true.
On
That's
the
just
plot.
wrong. No, that's just wrong.
I mean, you're right, it's wrong, but I don't know how to explain what I'm thinking. It is like, what you watched this before and you were like, okay, I need to watch this again because I feel like it might be better when I watch it when I'm older. What do you think rewatching Flip Flap is now?
Well, having rewatched it, I had seen a lot of videos about it and stuff like that. So I had kind of picked up on like, all right, so this is what the show's supposed to be about. Maybe if I watch it again, I'll understand. And I think for a lot of the stuff, I can figure, like, I could be like, oh, okay, so this is technically a spoiler, but it's not. Sheila, you're right with like minor plot points that don't really matter.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so in episode 6, I think, we find out that there's this senpai, as they call her,
Yes.
who paints, but she doesn't feel particularly feminine. She doesn't want to. The only thing she doesn't paint is her fingernails, because she doesn't think she's worthy of it. And they go to this place called Pure Illusion, which, as far as I can tell, and I think people generally agree, is that it's basically like the collective subconscious of just everybody.
Which is very much like Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yeah,
what the human instrumentality.
Yeah.
project.
When I said I think this is what it's about, and then Speedy said, "Oh, that's like Ava." I was like, "Okay, that is what it's about then," because
Like I said, everybody rips
exactly. And so they go to this Pure Illusion, and clearly they resolve some kind of inner turmoil that this girl is having. And then they come back to the real world. They see the girl, and she's thrown out all of her paintings, and feels more feminine. So, seems like, right? So that seems pretty obvious the second time around. But like Ava, people get into like these really complicated like Freudian readings of the show, and they try.
Except that in Ava it makes sense and in Flip Flappers it doesn't.
Well, I don't. Well, it's more that people try and go. They try and take like different Freudian ideas, like the id and the superego, and they try and be like, all right, so how does the id and the superego fit into this show? And they just can't really, like, they can't put all the pieces together, like convincingly.
Like you had a theory about what the show was about, like the sexual development of.
Oh yeah, I think that's
teenagers
that's definitely what it's about. Yeah, definitely.
and her sexual awakening.
Yeah, that I think people. Yeah, but that's like Freudian stuff. Freud studied like sexual development and how that affects behavior in all walks of life. So, though I'm not sure I'm convinced that the show's about an Oedipus complex, which is apparently what the show. That's might be a spoiler, but not really because the show doesn't make it obvious. Yeah, so some people say that show's about an Oedipus complex. I'm not really convinced. Some people say the show's about the id and the superego. I'm not really convinced. It's definitely about psychology. I agree with that, but I just don't think the show makes a good enough case for any one idea that you can say, yeah, the show's about this thing.
So has your opinion on the show improved?
No,
Decreased?
it's decreased a little bit. I think my desire to want to understand the show made it better. But yeah, but I still enjoyed it. I think it is good. But yeah.
When did you watch this for the first time?
In 2016 when it aired, so I was 14.
14. I still can't fathom what half of the shit is that is going on. It's a very pretty, well animated show. And you watching it 14 is just hilarious.
Well, I was like,
honestly.
I was just like, this is really pretty. I have no idea what's going on, but it looks good.
It looks really good.
Yeah,
man. But by the end, I feel like Nakus was a little harsh. Nakus is one of the people that we usually group watch with. Nakus was a little harsh on being like, I have no idea, I don't care about any of these characters. But he had a point. I found myself just very uninterested by the end in what was gonna happen in the end. Like, none of these characters really.
Yeah,
I like none.
It's a very like esoteric thing where the show isn't really about anything and it's just about the idea. And so if you're watching a show because you would like watching shows, you'll hate it because you're like, this is just nothing. This is just.
It is very much focused on exploring an idea, and for me, those kinds of shows kind of fall flat for me because I want there to be some kind of grounded plot, something that makes sense. But for these kinds of shows, usually exploring the ideas means taking a lot of liberties in what happens, and it doesn't always logically make sense, or it doesn't always it's very difficult
there's
to explain.
this no, I think I get it, but like that just reminds me of something that after, like when we were watching Digimon, one of the things that, you and I, like, you were explaining about, like, things not making any sense, or, like, how does this work? How does that work? Explain it to me. And then me trying to tell you, it's like Alice in Wonderland, right? It's a land of nonsense. It's like they're in this world where nothing makes sense.
There is like no grounding, so anything can happen.
You know how, like, people say, like, one of the points of Digimon is that the younger you are, the better you will probably fare in this world because the easier you can roll with the nonsense, right? So you either have to be young or young at heart. So Speedy, I just think that you may have lost, that part of your childishness. You need hard logical explanations for everything. That childlike wonder of just going with the flow and taking things for what they are, that is something you've lost. You don't have that anymore.
I don't have that anymore. I've lost.
Which is, I find that kind of sad. I find it to be a shame because there's a lot of like fun and enjoyment that you can have, especially like, making your own little fictional world. So, going off on your own tangents, or just, going outside into the world and deciding to see things differently than what you want to see. Like, I go outside sometimes just for walks, making up my own stories. And, like, for example, I'll wander through the forest, or, like, a part of the forest, because, I kind of live, like, at the beginning of the Black Forest. And I'll be like, oh, I'm in the middle of the forest. What could be happening here if this were my story, right? These kinds of things,
I mean,
those are, like, amazing things that, as you grow and reach maturity, when people say, like, stay a child at heart, I think that's what they mean, it's the capability to just fly with nonsense. That you don't have to make sense of everything. Stay open to the ideas of things not being the way you want them to be, or maybe not having an explanation, or just existing.
I just want to have a story that makes sense.
Yeah, but a story that makes sense doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be logical.
A story that has more to it than just an idea.
Except that you can't roll with a story where the entire point is actually embrace nonsense.
It's not embrace nonsense. The point is not to embrace nonsense. The point is to tell, to explain an idea through nonsense.
Yeah, and in Flip Flappers it might be. In Digimon it's really like, are you still a child at heart? Because if you're not going to be able to enjoy that. Which probably explains why I like it so much still and you don't.
I mean, Digimon is kind of coming out of left field here, but...
It's just something that, like, I got reminded as you explained to me why you didn't like it, is because, like, you need this hard logic. You need things to make sense in your world. You need them to have, like, the logic of the real world somewhere. You need them to, make sense the way they would here. So just exploring an idea and twisting the story and the logic for the exploration of ideas is something you cannot enjoy. Probably exactly for that reason. And the first time I thought that was, shortly after you and I watched that episode of Digimon together.
I feel like it might also be a little bit of an autistic thing, because autistic people like to have the world in solid rules, so they can make sense of it, so they can rely on those rules to tell them what's going on.
Except they don't exist.
They don't exist. That's not how the world works. But at least I have said enough about Flip Flappers. What else? Who's next? Pory, did you watch anything else?
I have been taking a break, and I have been enjoying it. I am now starting to catch up on stuff, but I've been loving not watching shows.
Yeah, I'll probably do that once the podcast is over, but just for the podcast, I want to continue watching.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to watch seasons anymore. I think that was not very...
That's what we've been telling you from the start. He's finally there.
He has changed his ways for the better. You've been cured.
Yes, indeed he has. He has reached a new level of maturity.
What? But then, who will we rely on to tell us which show is the best of the season?
It's just
there are more
than
enough AniTubers out there. We'll just keep watching them.
No, I don't like those videos where they just talk about previews.
I mean, I do like Giggooks, breakdowns of, the season in a nutshell. Those are funny. The Milsekai still gets me every time.
I've been watching Giggooks stuff less and less. I don't know. Maybe I'm just growing up.
Yeah, I haven't really been watching AniTube at all, to be honest. I feel like they're kind of...
exactly. Yeah, the same thing with like Arcada, Mother's Basement.
Yeah, for me it's just mostly been Gigguk and Mother's Basement. Like, I find Mother's Basement's brand of humor to be like funnier and funnier. Like, there's so many things that he says that just stick in my brain that I'm never gonna forget. Like, Miyamura being described as, crouching dweeb, hidden himbo. Stuff like that. And Gigguk, I don't know, Gigguk's brand of, fast, hard-hitting, balls-to-the-walls commentary is just, like, right up my style. As you know, for me, everything goes double speed, so AniTuber or any YouTuber or anybody, really, who goes double speed is, perfect for me.
I mean, it's fun, but for one, I don't really care about every single show that comes out every single season, so that's one part of the reason why I don't watch his stuff anymore. And the other part is I feel like those kinds of videos, especially the seasons in a nutshell, kind of feel the same at a certain point. Like they're different jokes, but they're also kind of the same.
For me,
That's 'cause every show is the
the
same.
reason why I still watch them is because, there are always, like, some anime in there. Like, there are always a few anime, usually the more anticipated ones, where, like, yeah, I've heard about them. I've heard from the manga. I've, like, or these are, like, really famous, or, or I've read the manga even. And I'm like, okay, let's see how this, reflects, let's see how this hits. Is it as good as, like, as I think it to be? Is it as popular as I hope it will be? Is it, as shit as I know it's going to be? So, for these kind of things, for me, it's not so much along the lines of the anime itself, but, like, my impression versus what does the rest of the world think. That's what interests me. And Mother's Basement and Gigok especially, to me, are, like, kind of the voices of that, let's put it that way.
Honestly, currently what I watch on YouTube is like not consistent at all. Like I open YouTube to get enjoyment, and then I'm like, but what am I going to watch? And I just rarely even know what I want to watch on YouTube anymore. Usually my recommended is full of things that I'm like, kind of don't feel like watching that or that or that or that.
How about you just try watching some live action series? Then you probably just need some new media outlet.
I've tried. I've tried watching that before. I've once opened Netflix and be like, okay,
he has
I'll
once
just try
opened Netflix.
Let me just try a few shows/movies that I've either heard about, that have actors that I know that I liked and other stuff, but nothing really stuck with me that one time. Like, there's one show like that's about serial killers. I tried watching that, but I really didn't like the dialogue.
Because it's one time. How many different anime have you tried until you found Detective Conan?
0.
Detective Conan was the first anime you ever watched.
Yes, you have a good point, because I have watched a lot of anime, but Detective Conan was the first ever anime I watched, and I just binged it for 400 and something
you got lucky.
episodes. So
because I give every bet I could have given, like, if you had watched or if you had tried, episodes of several others out there, you would have been like, no.
Yeah, I might have not liked it.
So that was a lucky
I really
break.
liked but no, it was because my uncle had specifically recommended me Detective Conan, because we were playing a board game called Orient Express, where you try to solve murders, and I expressed back then that I really liked mystery and solving murders. So I was like, oh, I know a show like that. You should watch it. And then I ignored that recommendation for like 6 months, and then one day I thought of it randomly. I looked it up on the internet, and
in all honesty, most of what makes early Detective Conan great is the music. The soundtrack is just mwah.
Oh, the OG Detective Conan soundtrack.
I love that little track so much.
Yeah, jazz.
It's not
jazz.
It's a
amazing.
saxophone, but you cannot call that jazz. Not everything that includes a saxophone is jazz.
Let my uncultured ass call this
Fuck
jazz
no.
just once.
That is literally an insult to every black person out there. You do not get to call that motherfucking jazz, honey. I shall not allow it.
Okay, saxophone play, whatever.
It's very much like the typical, like, noir aesthetic. So let's just call it noir music.
Noir music. I'm fine with that. Yes. No, I got lucky, but I get you. You have a point. I have watched a lot more anime compared to live action.
And you did
series.
like the pilot or the first episode of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. You could finish that.
It was fun, but it's not something I'm be very excited to return to. One show that I definitely, if I feel like revisiting a live action show, it would be Brooklyn 99, because that show is very funny to me.
Yeah, it's not my type of humor.
It is very much my humor, but I don't always crave to watch that kind of stuff.
Talking about humor, let's get to my anime before we
Yes.
so that we can finally get through this and get to our actual topic.
Yes, and one of your anime, because we've talked about this, also ties into our topic, so we could maybe leave that for last.
Gintama,
Yes.
which is like the anime that everybody says like you're gonna love the humor. If you don't like the humor, you're not gonna like it. I do not like 95% of the humor in Gintama, but I am warming up to it, like quite a bit actually. But yeah, we'll talk about Gintama more later on. Same with the final season of Attack on Titan, which I have also watched since, but I'm not going to go into that now because we're going to be talking about later on.
Spoilers also. I really want to watch it. I don't know much of anything about Attack on Titan beyond season 3.
Alright, I'll keep the spoilers to a minimum then.
Please.
Fate Stay Night Unlimited Blade Works, of which I have only watched the first part so far, so I'm not going to talk about that until I've watched the second part.
Yeah, that's fine.
Where we at? I actually have to go through my list. A Place Further Than the Universe I finally finished, which I did like the story of it quite a bit, but like my enjoyment of it, and I said this before, was hampered so much by the girls.
I've never really... It wasn't really for me. I like the show.
A Place Further Than the Universe.
Yeah. I really like the show, but it's not a show that I went into with a critical mind. I really just went into it for enjoyment only. And the girls didn't really grate me. The girls really didn't grate me, so in that way...
Well, you know how much...
It's a bad
girl
show.
The moe, like, you know, the moe talk, the moe walk, the moe movement, the moe animation, the moe acting, and those girls lean into that so much, and you know how much that grates on me and how much I hate it.
Yeah, you hate that. I don't really mind it.
You like it. You love it.
Not on its own, but it can certainly enhance a show for me if it's done right.
For me, it just detracts. There's literally no show that has done this where I would consider it having done right.
You don't like cute characters?
I do like cute characters. I don't like moified characters. There's a big difference.
They're just cute.
No. They're not just cute.
We've had this. You've had this argument before.
It's not about them being cute. It's about them, you know, being catered to a specific type of man who wants a specific type of thing in a woman that no actual woman can ever actually give them, because that is not how people act.
I think it's just cute.
It is a bastardization of, not just of real life, but it's a bastardization of tropes that have already been taken out of real life, that are already pretty much, you know, far from what real life is, only to then be, how did you call it? To then be cannibalized over and over and over again until you have perfected the formula that makes a certain type of guy, most of them virgins, really, really, really like them because they can never get something like that out of a real woman.
Deja vu, I've been in this place before.
This is just the the meme where there's the girl who walks across like the gymnastic mat, and then the one who like does a backflip over a car and goes into space and shit. You know what I mean?
I have not, but that sounds hilarious.
That's what's going on right now. It's just Speedy's like, they're cute, full stop, and then Sheila has to write a paragraph. It's so fun. That's so fun.
So I don't like moe.
But okay.
I've watched the Konosuba movie, which, like, okay, the first season of Konosuba was The second season, you know, did have its chuckle. I liked it a bit better. Mostly because, you know, now that we've gotten to know the characters, it's like, yeah, it feels, you know, like more... Like, you know, all of the humor isn't so much introductory, but, you know, very naturally comes out of this typical sitcom setting that they have. Oh, that's the meme. Okay. And the Konosuba movie kind of takes that to another level. And I really like that. But, you know, it was a little bit controversial when it came out because of the rape jokes. And I have to admit, I absolutely loved the rape jokes. I laughed so hard at the rape jokes. But my humor is a bit more on the dark side anyways, so...
Okay.
The rape jokes were the funniest thing to have ever come out of Konosuba for me.
Weird flex, but okay.
Moving on, what else have I watched? Oh yeah, Monogatari Season 2. Fuck Monogatari.
Oh, that's...
Fuck it.
Oh, that's just...
It can fucking go to hell.
No,
I hate it so fucking much. I had to physically physically make myself watch even another fucking episode. Because, oh my god, that show is so awful.
Sheila, it's the law of numbers that people have to be wrong eventually. Well, they can't always be right.
Pory,
Statistically, you'll be wrong sometimes.
I can break down to you, step by step, why that show is not good. Like, one thing that I absolutely wanted to believe is that if I were to read this, I would probably enjoy the living daylights out of it. But anything on the visual spectrum of it is an absolute disaster. And the first season I couldn't quite pin down why I didn't like it. But the more I watch it, the more I get it. I can tell you step by step, if you want me to, put some pictures up here and break down why it's not good. Do you want me to do that? Because I will fucking do that.
You know what? After this episode has finished recording, you can do that. If Pory really feels like.
Pory, are you down for that? All right,
sure.
let's do that.
All I will say is that Shinobu Time is peak.
Okay, that's actually true. Like the Shinobu arc.
That
was
is
the only thing about both Monogatari second season and Hana Monogatari, which I have watched right after, that is actually enjoyable. But Monogatari season 1 I didn't like. Neko Monogatari I did.
You didn't like Hana?
No.
I thought Hana is so much different.
It is different, but like the visuals are still as stupidly all over the place as they were in the rest of it.
That's the idea. They're just fucking. It's just mind salad. It's great.
Mind salad? What is that?
Yeah. Wait, do you know what a word salad is?
Just a lot of words mashed together to.
Yeah, it's just a whole bunch of. It's just incoherent thought. Yeah, but it's that. But it's an animation. It's great.
Yeah. No. So we'll go after this after.
Yeah.
We'll go into this after.
Okay.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Golden Wind. Now, as if you remember, I did fairly much like Diamond is Unbreakable.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like, the 3 episodes before that. I forget what they were called. I did not like Golden Wind very much.
There's very little to argue about that because.
True, I agree. I haven't seen it, but I agree.
I mean, the one thing, like Golden Wind, kind of felt like a step back almost because one of the reasons why I like Golden Wind is because not Golden Wind, why I like Diamond is Unbreakable is Diamond is Unbreakable plays in just this one city, right? And you get to know all of these characters, and because it's not constantly a new setting, because in pretty much every other iteration of JoJo's, they're constantly traveling, right, from one place to the other. In Diamond is Unbreakable, they do not. So you get to know these people and these characters, and you get to know them inside and out, right? You get to know them, what they do after school, what they do in their free time, who they're friends with, what they like to eat, what they don't, what things that they really don't like, the way they make friends, all of that. You get to know these characters inside and out. It all feels a little more grounded. All of that is just thrown out the windows in Golden Wind. There is this one scene at the very beginning where one of the characters, Narancia, really, really likes music, right? So he always has headphones on, or he has one of these all beatbox players, at his ear. He's always playing music somehow. And there's this dance that comes out of nowhere once they manage to tie down one of the enemy characters, and everybody just joins in, right? And that was great because it's character building. It's character building outside of, their shallow personalities, the first things that you notice about them and their backstories. It's character personality, it's character building in terms of how does their friendship work? What do these characters like? What do they do when they're not fighting for their lives? And that is the last that you see of it. Everything else after that is just fighting. And, people fighting with, the personalities that were set up from the very first time that you meet them, and that's all you learn about them aside from their backstory. And everything after that is just, straight up action, fighting, action, fighting. Sometimes, and if it's not that, it's, moving to the next location. And then fighting while moving to the next location. It's just, there's nothing to it. I think that's the real reason why I don't like JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. Outside of the action, there isn't much to it.
I don't even like the action in JoJo. Now, maybe it's different in Golden Wind, but I feel like a lot of the action is just, they will say what they do.
No, that's still the same in Golden Wind.
And then you see the effect, but there's no, impact
you know what?
in
The
between.
animation, the fight animation has gotten better. I think it was really just in episode 1 and maybe a bit in episode 2. Not episode, part 1 and part 2, where, you know, like, the action was like that. But since Stardust Crusaders, it has very much gotten better.
Right, at least there's some appeal to the show.
Yeah, but, you know, it's still, you know, while this is happening, somebody aside yelling out what exactly is happening, why it's happening, so that doesn't change. Also, for all you JoJo fucks out there, how the fuck does King Crimson work?
Is he the metal guy?
No, he's the boss in Golden Wind. And how the fuck does King Crimson work is a meme, and I understand why, because JoJo in general doesn't make a lot of sense.
Is he the guy that can, like, predict what's going to happen?
Yeah. Except that he can't, but he also can.
He can
can't.
sometimes.
And he can also...
yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, how the fuck does it work? It makes no fucking sense. Like, even for JoJo standards, it doesn't make sense. What else have I watched? Oh yeah, I finished Inuyasha. Which, you know, I've said everything that I think I've already said everything I think about it, like, when I finished, like, the quote-unquote first season. Nothing new to add here. It's more Inuyasha. Loved the ending. Wish they would have kissed a bit earlier, because that final kiss seemed very forced. Oh, yeah, okay, Speedy. Speedy, I don't know if you remember, but remember I told you about Jewel Pet?
Sorry?
Do you remember when I told you about fucking Jewel Pet?
Jewel Pet is fucking sick. That's good shit.
Yes, it is!
Sorry, I don't...
Oh my god.
Jewel Pet?
Yes. It was that really weird kid show that I watched just because I wanted downtime, and then all of a sudden, like, it got so crazy and wacky and sexualized.
I don't remember this at all.
Okay, give me 1 second, because
How do you write this?
I saved
Jewel
Jewel
Pet.
Pet. Yeah, Jewel Pet's that fucking epic.
I know I can find the conversation. I
think there's a
saved it.
I think there was a new one that I saw that I dropped.
Okay. Yeah, there was a new one. So, literally while I was working this is what I wrote to Speedy while I was watching this. So, I'm watching Jewel Pet Kiradeko, which is a kid show for little girls, obviously, but after all the serious shit I've watched lately, I needed some lighthearted fluff, so I thought, why not? And it's not bad. Like, not good, but not bad either. Until, like, 10 or so episodes in, the bad guy's henchman gets found out, so he disappears and comes back as this really sexual female character that he is way too into playing this role, right? But he's pretending, like, the entire time he's pretending. But, like, he has these huge fake pedunks, and he walks and talks like the blonde chick from Batman Beyond, you know, the super sexualized one, who's supposed to be, like, irresistibly sexy, and there's this character who's a follower of the mean girl in the show, because there's a mean girl in the show, because of course there is, and he is so weirdly into the cross-dressing bad guy, but of course you just know that he's a cross-dressing bad guy, and there's a scene where the bad dude tries out different outfits, you know, like, as the teacher, one more suggestive than the next, and, oh yeah, also, like, the cross-dressing bad guy wears a lot of suggestive outfits, right? And it's so filled with the most ridiculous sexual tension, and the bad guy does things like asking the kid to pull up the zipper on his dress and shit, and it's almost like seducing the kid while cross-dressing, and I'm like here, like, this is a kid show for very young kids, like 5 to 10, maybe 12-year-olds at most, and like, what the fuck are you guys doing putting fetish material into this? Who will allow this? Someone needs to get fired over this.
What year did it come out?
That's a very good question. Let me double check. 2012, 2013.
Wow. What a time to be alive.
Yeah. Like, but it gets better, right? Because, like, several episodes later, like, there's this B character who's definitely teenage coded, right? So she's, like, meant to be a teen. And she's falling in love with an elementary school human boy. And the boy dates her to get back at his big brother because it has this big brother complex. Because the big brother always outshines him in everything and definitely has a brother complex. And they go on dates and actually really sweet. And at the end of the day, he invites her over for dinner. And she takes it as an invitation for something unspecified. And it's like, it's obvious you're supposed to get sex. And I'm like, girl, how the fuck did you expect that human fucking dick to go into your fucking bee pussy? It's just, this show is great. I love this so much. And there's an episode where there's a walking rabbit, right? Like, she's the main character. It's the walking rabbit. And she's doing, like, Michael Jackson's Thriller. But, you know, they're actually, like like all of her background dancers are rotting zombie sardines or something, and like the not rotting sardines are all wearing a samba outfit, and they're all doing Michael Jackson's Thriller together, and like more sexual innuendos because the sardines are giving birth, and another one has like mad muscles, and all the girl sardines are just lusting all over him.
I am.
And then they're not even anthropomorphized or anything. They're just normal fucking sardines.
Is it like if I
standing upright somehow, and the healthy ones are giving birth and dancing samba, and the running ones are like still dancing to the fucking Thriller choreography. And I don't know how this happened, but this show was great. I loved this so much.
If I look up Jewel Pet on Google, it gets me this show. Which
that's stupid.
That's the one.
It?
Yeah, I mean the one that I watched was like the second or third series of this. It's like a little bit like a Pretty Cure, where like every show is
it is basically Pretty Cure, but with little animals.
Yeah. This one is the one that I watched. Jewel Pet Cure Deco. I have never watched the original one because I don't think it's been translated. The second one was kind of boring, but Kira Deco was so off its rockers. I loved it so much. It was so fucking wild. Like the mid-season finale. The mid-season finale was, they are out eating, right? Out having lunch somewhere.
You do realize I'm likely not to put that particular part in the podcast.
Oh, but you got it. It's so hilarious. Okay, I'm gonna stop. Go to the next one.
I might have to cut a little bit on that, but
yeah, it did kind of seem like an incoherent squeal at some points, I'll be honest with you.
And at a certain point it became unintelligible.
All the more reason you gotta keep it in. Yeah, this show is so for off its rockers. So I watched Dr. Stone Wars, which, it's more Dr. Stone.
Yeah.
Still just as good, just as fun. Watched Horimiya, which, I kind of get now, Pory, why you said that it feels like it's lost focus. Because, I mean, the anime is like 110 chapters long, and they put all of that into 12 episodes.
Do you agree that in the anime, the side characters kind of detract from the anime as a whole?
Yes, but actually no. Like, with what the show tries to do, right? Absolutely. Yes, it is. Okay. So yes, because like what the show tries to do, which like more of a drama, more of a plot-heavy drama with some comedy sprinkled in. The side characters that don't really have any of the drama that like especially Miyamura goes through, kind of detracts from it because they're only here for the humor and that's kind of it. The manga is very differently built in that it never tries to be drama, right? That from the very beginning the manga was, very much a kind of unfocused, slice of lifey comedy anime with, I don't know, maybe every 5 to 10 chapters at most, have a dramatic chapter put in there. And the dramatic chapters would hit really, really hard because you got to know these characters a lot more within, the time span of the comedy slice of life. So when something dramatic happened to them, you'd be like, oh my god, these characters that I only know to be smiley and stupid and happy, actually have these, these deep-rooted problems. And, taking that pacing away from the show and making it much more drama-focused was great at the beginning, but once it ran out of, like, goals, so to speak, for the main couple to reach, that kind of came back to bite it in its ass. And I remember when I first watched the first episode, I was like, why is the show so dark? Like, why is the color theme so dark, right? The color palette so dark. Like, if I had directed the show, the first thing I was thinking about was I would have made this a much bubblier tone, right? It has very strong gradients from very light to very, very dark. And most slice of life shows don't really have that. I was going to go with a color palette that was something along the lines of Your Lie in April, right? Something much, much brighter, much lighter. But now that the show's over and I've watched it, I kind of get it because they really wanted to focus on the drama over the comedy slice of life. And that made it great for the first thirds of the show, but it also took away one of the biggest strengths of the manga, which is, the lightheartedness and how hard the drama hit when it did come because of the lightheartedness.
Do you think the anime is good Do you like
Yes.
it? Do you like it as an adaptation of source material that you enjoy?
I think it could have been better, but yes, I think it's good. Definitely good. It did what it did very well. It was definitely very competent. But I'd be amiss if I didn't say that, I kind of lament that very careful balance that the manga has set up that the anime just kind of decided to ignore. Which, but it did also manage to capture the really, really important parts of the manga, especially everything going on with Miyamura and, his evolution. But, there are just so many amazing parts where, that evolution of all of the characters really shines, like the sports festival or their trip to Kyoto, or, even just small little things like there's this one chapter that I really, really love in which Hori just tells Miyamura, yeah, come over for dinner, I'll make you what you like. For no reason. She just, wants to do something sweet for him. They're both together at that point already. And so she's like, okay, what do you like? And he's like, I like stew, right? And just as school is out, she's already home for some reason. I think he's hanging out with, what's the friend's name? The guy friend's name, I forget. And she tells him, or somebody tells him, yeah, Hori really, really doesn't like stew. Like, she absolutely can't eat it. It makes her vomit, right? And he just runs home or runs to Hori's place, like hugs her, and it's like, you don't have to. And Hori's like literally there cooking with, holding her nose because she cannot smell it. And she's like, yeah, so what? You like it. I'm cooking this for you, right? It was just one chapter. Yeah. It was, very lighthearted, very sweet. There's nothing there, but it's a definite, a definite character moment there. It's a definite, bonding moment. A definite show of, how much the one means to each other, how far, how much they're willing to each, go out of their own comfort zone just to make the other happy. And the manga was littered with moments like this. So if you have, cute, uplifting, lighthearted moments like this, and you sprinkle in some drama in between, that drama hits, and it really, really, really hits. And that hitting was kind of what the anime was missing a little bit.
So moving on, because we don't want this to become at 3 hours. To get in touch.
I still watched more though.
Yeah, but you have been going through your shows quite a lot. You also watch a lot more than us, which is something that we didn't. That's not the way this podcast started out. I think this podcast started out the other way around, where we watched a lot more than you, but in the end, it's you who's watching a lot more than us. But I do want to get.
Oh, can I talk about just one more, please?
Make it.
Because I absolutely.
Oh, she said pretty please, Speedy.
Ah, God, I can't say no to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Skate the fucking animation.
All right, yeah.
That show's terrible.
No.
No.
I've been seeing gifs of that over.
Skate the Infinity, not the animation. Skate the Infinity, not the animation. Skate the Infinity is fucking great, okay?
No.
It deserves all of the praise it gets.
It's fucking bad.
It's so unfunny.
Pory, why do you think this show is bad?
It's just
How
not
much did
funny.
you watch?
3 episodes or 4 episodes, something like that.
4 episodes.
It's just.
I don't think it's meant to be funny.
I think it is. I think it's definitely meant to be funny.
Goofy, but
it's just that.
I mean, in all honesty, like for me, as we all know by now, I'm fairly sporty. I actually picked up skateboarding in like a half a day, which means nothing to you. I know.
No, but in fact, it means nothing to me because you pick up everything ridiculously quickly. It's like that's like your entire thing. You are hyper competent in almost everything.
Okay, no. Skateboarding is like really, really difficult for a lot of people because there's a sense of balance to it that very few sports actually train, right? And then there's me with my 13 years of gymnastics, which, is like one of the sports that you need the most balance for. So, that is balance that I have trained for the majority of my life, that I could put right into skateboarding. So, that thing about like Manga, picking up the skateboard almost immediately and getting the hang of it immediately because it's so. I did snowboarding too for a while. I haven't been snowboarding or skiing in a while, so yeah, there's definitely like big similarities there. That was something I was like, oh wait, I haven't seen that yet. Like the going from one sport to another and having that muscle memory. That training. something is being something that you can take from one, putting it straight into the other. So that was great. Point number one. Point number two is the skateboarding and the skateboarding community. Like, the skateboarding community is legit so wholesome, and Reki is, like, the very much the personification of that. Just that feeling of, like, hanging out with your friends, having a good time, trying, that one thing and falling flat on your face. Lucky for me, I've only fallen flat on my face once, but the one time I planted hard. It's just very relatable. It's very clear that, the people who wrote this, or at the very least, like the director or whoever's behind this, really, knows that feeling, really knows the community, really knows what the people are like, really has captured, that sense of hanging out with your friends, learning skateboarding together. It's so relatable if you are, if you've had that before. And then, like just that summer feeling, when they have the summer episode and they go to the beach and just, like having fun, just going down the lane on your skateboards, just riding along, having those impromptu little races. It's so, I don't know how they did it, but they captured that feeling bit by bit, and I watched that, and as I was watching it, I really needed to find the urge to just turn off turn off the TV, take the next flight back to California and hang out with Fish and the boys again, and go for a skateboarding session.
I mean, this sounds like a pretty fun show. Why did you like it, Pory?
So, I'm tired of the stupid. Two main characters. One is super hyped up, and the other one's like really stoic and chill. Like
Haikyuu as well.
Like every fucking show.
I mean, to be fair, like Langa is kind of he's definitely stoic, but he's also kind of an idiot, and I love him. But I love Reki more. Reki is like Hinata, but if Hinata knew what he was doing, he's opening, he's open, he's welcoming, he kind of takes Langa under his wing, and with the patience of a saint, like explains everything to him. And he's like the glue that holds everyone together, right? He has the the open disposition of, Hinata from Haikyuu, but, he's more balanced than Hinata personality-wise, and he doesn't have Hinata's talent. So there's that too. He does what he does because he loves it, not because he has an innate talent at it.
But Pory is tired of it.
Yeah, it's just, like, but they play this fire and ice personality dichotomy so to the book that it's like almost insulting. It's like I've seen this so many times that I just don't want to watch it anymore.
Yeah, the personality tropes are there, but the difference is, at least in this one, is they always get along. They never really fight. There's the fire and ice isn't really fire and ice so much as it is, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe it, because, yeah, one is like a bit hyper, one is very much stoic, but, unlike with, let's say, Kageyama, Hinata, where they constantly go at each other, those two are very harmonious. And I kind of like that, too.
Yeah,
There's no competition.
That just doesn't, like, you've stated this distinction, but it's so minuscule to me that I don't care.
It made no difference.
And then one of the things that, like, where it really hit me was when the second half, when Reki's imposter syndrome started. Oh, that one just hits so close to home.
Like, they were hinting at it on, like, the second episode, and I was already just like, I don't care. Like, feels so, like, this is obviously the direction that you're going to take the show, and I just don't care.
I mean, yes, but in all honesty, in that show, they did it so much better and so much more relatable than, at least in anime, any other anime I've watched it. Because, he doesn't really Reki never blames anyone for it. He just recognizes that, he doesn't have the talent to be that good. He's probably never going to be that good. Or if he does, he's going to have to work a lot harder for it. Doesn't mean he doesn't have any talent. But, it's him kind of, just like needing to take a step back and coming to terms with that. And then, getting to know or getting to learn, what does he want to do with himself now? And I was honestly so afraid when I watched this that, they would just be like, yeah, you don't have the talent for it. Why don't you go do something else, do something similar? And that was actually set up with, like Reki being really, really good at making boards. and then him, like being like, okay, like I can't do skateboarding, but I'm really good at making boards, so I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to be happy with it. But that is not the route that they go, and I was actually so happy with it. And the conclusion that they came to also is something that I very heavily relate to. And to me, as an artist, an animation student, spending 8 hours every day in a room full of other animators, you constantly have the feeling of, oh my god, everybody's so much better than me. I cannot keep up. I will never be able to keep up. Those feelings that thing that he goes through is just so relatable, because that's me every single day of my life. It's great. I love it. Also, Reki is best boy.
Which one's that?
He's mine. You can't have him.
The red one?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the red one's fine. Okay, the other problem I have with the silver one is that, and I have this problem with a lot of shows about sports and games and stuff, is this guy who's never played the game before, in like episode 2 or 3, he's losing this race because this guy like cheats and skips the line or something. It's against the fat dude with the heavy metal face paint. And he like, I think what the show is like implying he did is he like slingshots off of his own like centrifugal force to gain like massive amounts of speed, which I don't think that's how physics works. But even if it was, the idea that this is your second day in the sport and you're the first person that came up with that idea is just so absurd that it just takes me out of the show. I just can't watch it.
I have done that though. I've literally done things like that.
Yeah, but
I've gone parkouring with my brother and his friends, one of whom has been parkouring with like a whole group of people for years. One of them like being an actual trainer, and I have done things that none of them ever even thought of doing, just because I had the training from gymnastics, because that was something I was regularly doing in gymnastics. It's a thing.
Yeah, but
it's real.
On the other hand, again, you are hyper competent, and you shouldn't be comparing yourself to normal humans.
Yes, but my point is, like, Manga is somebody who, I think it was even stated in episode 2 that he is, or episode 3 or 4, it's been stated that he's been snowboarding from the time he was 2. With a very, very competent, snowboarding trainer, his father, that also comes up later on. So, he is very well trained, very highly trained, and there are definite similarities between snowboarding and skateboarding that absolutely make me believe that he could pull this off. Maybe not on his first try, right? Or at least he probably could pull it off on his first try just because he has the muscle memory for it. He probably couldn't land as much because landing between skateboarding and snowboarding is very different. But, like having these things that you do in one sport, carrying them to another sport where people who have only ever done sport never even thought of doing that, is something I can see, because I have literally done that. Because after 10 years of gymnastics, or 7 years of gymnastics, I think at the time, going into parkouring, that is literally what I did.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I just, it feels like almost like an insult to professionals to be like, yeah, I just rock up to this thing and then boom, I'm better than everybody else. And
I mean, in all honesty, a lot of sports, requires very similar type of training, right? There is always a type of core, like a certain amount of core training that you need, a certain amount of balance training that you need, a certain amount of conditioning too that you need. And any sport that you have, done for a certain amount of time, the training, the things that you have trained in that you have built up, the muscle memory you have built up, the muscles that you have built up, all of that you will be able to take into a different sport, and you will have that down pat better than someone else, than people who have done that sport for a longer amount of time. I had going from gymnastics into parkouring, I had the acrobatics down better than some of the people who had been doing parkouring for, as long as I had done gymnastics, which at that point was 7 to 10 years. What I was lacking, of course, was the conditioning. I was out of breath a lot faster because parkouring goes on for a lot longer. But the acrobatics And the balance was something I had down better than most of the people doing the actual parkouring. That's, even if it is an insult, that's just how it's going to be, because in the end, training is training. The things that you learn, the things that you take out of it are going to help you wherever you go next.
Moving on, and this time without...
For real.
Yeah.
To our actual topic.
So, this topic, which is the fact that this usually in anime, the status quo is protected throughout the plot and not challenged by the main characters, was kind of a thing that we sort of stumbled upon, I believe, in one of our conversations. And it seemed like...
I think it was in one of our tests, wasn't it?
I believe so, yeah. And it seemed like an interesting thing to talk about. And then recently you watched Gintama, you were like, yeah, that's a good anime to like make an example of.
Yeah, okay, to like invite you guys into what we're trying to do here to our audience is we have noticed that there's a big difference in between Western animation and or Western storytelling in general and Eastern, especially Japanese storytelling, in which in Japanese storytelling the heroes are always the people who protect the status quo. See My Hero Academia as the best possible example. And the villains are always the one trying to change it, even if they're, you know, if their stories or their reasons or their judging is like very much justified and very much understandable. At the end of the day, they are still pretty much always framed like as the villain, and, you know, framed as the bad guys, framed as the people you should not be rooting for, even if you can sympathize with them. And that happens a lot in anime. And the first time we stumbled over that in one of our tests, we were having actually big problems, you know, or troubles thinking of counterexamples in anime. Whereas in Western media, you know, toppling the government, or, you know, going against the rules if the rules are harmful, going against society if society hurts you, those people are very often framed as the heroes. See, most prominent example, the Hunger Games. Even in Harry Potter, starting book 5, that very much happens. You know, all of the YA-like novels. In many cases, like, even Marvel, starting at Civil War, you know, has this idea of which one is better, you know, like following the rules or not, or going against the government. And Marvel doesn't really take a side at all. It asks you to take a side. Captain America, Black Panther actually has a very interesting take on this, in which the hero is the one wanting to protect the status quo, the villain is the one wanting to change the status quo, but the hero recognizes that the villain was correct even if his methods was wrong, and then turns into wanting to change the status quo in much more peaceful ways, which, you know, we don't get to see too often either. So that's like definitely a very, very, very big difference between, you know, the West and the East. And I don't know, first of all, it's quite obvious, you know, how much that reflects as a general mindset. But it is a little bit worrisome on my end, because it feels like Western storytelling is more nuanced. You know, sometimes the villains are on the side of the government, sometimes they're not. But in Japan, it's 95 at least % of the time, the villains are the ones on the side of, you know, the government and on the side of the rules. And the people who want to change them have always been slighted in some way and always have very justifiable reason for wanting to change things, but are always the villains.
I feel like, yeah.
And I find that worrisome.
There's very few anime that like that really dive into the hero actually wanting to change the status quo. There are some that through their occupation, let's say, deny or don't care about the status quo and will change it if it seems to further their own goals. See, for example, One Piece, where being a pirate basically means rejecting the holders of the status quo, but their goal is not to change the status quo per se. It's just part of their thing.
Yeah, One Piece is like the one example that we managed to think of at the time, wasn't it?
And then just now you finished another season of Gintama?
Season of Gintama, yeah. So the reason I thought of that actually was I first thought of that. I remember when I was watching Dororo. Funny enough, Osamu Tezuka like has a lot of shows where the status quo is challenged, or at the very least where you have both sides being somewhat correct. He does that a lot. Atom, or Astro Boy as we know it here in the West, does this a lot, where it has this very vast world building where both the side of the government but also the people who go against the government wanting to change things for the better are both equally right. And he does this in Dororo too, where am I allowed to spoil Dororo for you guys?
I watched it, so.
No, actually, I want to watch it.
Okay, so I'll try without spoiling it then. But you have one side, Dororo, who, that's kind of the premise, he wants to get his limbs back, right? His body was stripped from him as a child. He wants to get them back.
I've watched...
Which, is very much in his right.
I've watched, like, 4 episodes.
It's very good, continue. But then, somewhere around the midway point, we find out that, there's a lot more attached to this. And that makes the conflict, like Dororo, Hyakimaru, the main character, is very much set in his goal of, getting his body back, which, again, very much in his right? It was stripped from him, it was taken from him. He was the sacrifice for the prosperity of the land, right? First episode. But, we find out that there's kind of a caveat to this fairly early on, and you find then there are characters who are like, it is your right, but I still have to stop you because that caveat that comes with it causes trouble for everyone except for you. Or at the same time being like, what happened to you was awful, but I don't have the power to help you. Or others, like Dororo herself, being like, I don't know which one is right anymore and which one is wrong anymore, what you should do, because you are in the right, but everybody else is in the right too. So there's this whole moral dilemma, and there is not really a right side taken. And Osamu Tezuka has this in a lot of his works, and like I said, the biggest one being Astro Boy. So it's kind of interesting that, this morality is a lot more nuanced than it is in Western TV, definitely in Western TV at the time, but even Western TV today. In Japan in the 60s and 70s, and then has deteriorated versus in the US, where at the time the Hays Code was, very much still in effect, directing, what is allowed to be framed how has since become more complex, but it's still not as complex as Japanese animation was in the 60s. So that's also an interesting dichotomy. Anyways, back to Gintama. Gintama also takes a very interesting stance on it that is similar to Dororo in that on the one side you have the Shinsengumi, which are on the side of the law and on the side of, maintaining the status quo. And while they are kind of foils sometimes to, the Oddjobs, our main characters, they're not really, like, painted as civilians or in a bad light, right? Then you have, Suras, or Katsura, because he doesn't want to be called Sura, him and his little Joey fraction, which also are sometimes foils to Gintama and his crew, Gintoki and his crew, but are never really, painted as the bad guys. So you have, like, these two separate sides, one who is for the upheaval, and one who is, for preserving the peace, none of them really being the bad guys. But then you have, the Harusame, the pirates, wanting to, change the status quo. And what was his name? Takata? No.
Takasugi.
No. Takasugi, thank you. And on the other side, the Bakufu, the overlords, the alien overlords that, changed Edo into what it is in the show, wanting to keep the status quo, and they're both also bad guys. Or painted as the bad guys. So now, which side are you supposed to be on? Are you supposed to be, for maintaining the status quo, or are you supposed to be against maintaining the status quo and changing things for the better?
There's no on that spectrum. There's no right side. It's more about who the main characters are, and you like the main characters, so you support the main characters and what they're trying to do. And that's how the morality of this show is kind of formed when it comes to the.
But that's one thing, but it's also a lot more complex than that, because The people who are framed to be, you know, like quote unquote the good guys, especially Gintoki, are always the people who try to follow their own moral code and protect something, right? Protect whatever it is important to them. So that's why even if, let's say, Gintoki and the Shinsengumi clash, the Shinsengumi aren't the bad guys, because they too just follow their own moral code of, you know, protecting Edo and protecting the people in it and protecting the people they love. And that's why Takasugi, despite maybe not being the big bad guy, is the ultimate foil to Gintama, because Gintoki wants to protect, right? He wants to protect the family that he found. He wants to protect this life that he found. He wants to protect, you know, all of the people of Edo and this huge community that he has. You know, he wants to protect things the way he couldn't protect them in the Edo War. That's his, you know, his moral code. He's following his moral code. He's following everything that his teacher told him. And Takasugi, he doesn't want to protect anything. He just wants to destroy. He wants to destroy absolutely everything until there's nothing left. And that is the exact opposite to Gintama's moral code. And that makes him, you know, the ultimate foil to Gintoki as a character. Mm-hmm. So that also has an interesting way of, it doesn't really take a side. And it really says that, you know, it doesn't matter what side you're on. What's more important is the reason why you're doing the things that you're doing.
Which is a pretty good takeaway and a pretty good mentality to have, right?
I guess so. Pory, what do you think? You haven't been saying anything for a while.
I mean, he hasn't watched the show, so it's a little difficult for him to...
Yeah, I mean I can
on that philosophy in general.
I mean, are you asking about how a show having like no right or wrong, or are you asking?
Just both. Your take on it.
Well, to try and keep it to the topic as much as possible, this idea of there being no, like there is no good, there is just always bad. Like I think this is in anime quite a bit. I think Gundam is probably the easiest one to point to where, you know, it doesn't matter. Everyone in this war is the bad guy in this war, right?
Oh, that's kind of like Attack on Titan.
I haven't seen Attack on Titan, but I agree. So to say that like anime maintains a status quo, I think that's true, but I think like all media does that because at the end of the day, you need people to fund your show, and you need people to watch your show, and so you can't just be like completely out of left field with some crazy, you know, crazy progressive take because people.
I mean, the Hunger Games kind of did.
I feel like in the West, shows are find it much easier to take the we're gonna bring down this thing rather than protect it.
Yeah, but I think that's just because that idea is more like acceptable in the culture.
Yeah, I think it's...
that was the point.
I think this very much stems from a cultural difference.
Because in Japan it's all about, you know, keep the harmony. Right? It's like literally the entire like thing about Japanese is, you know, don't disrupt the status quo. Keep the harmony always. Under any and all circumstances. And it goes into like very, very small kind of problematic problems. Like, I don't know if you've heard, but a few years ago, there was this case that made international headlines of a girl being forced to dye her hair black. Like, her natural hair color was light brown. And she was forced to dye her hair black to fit into the school better, despite the fact that dyeing, like, she was... I'm not entirely certain what the problem was. Was she allergic, or was it like... It was having, like, really, really bad effect on the skin of her head, right? And, like, giving her real health troubles. But, you know, in the Japanese mindset, it's like, your troubles don't matter. What's important is that you fit into this status quo. So her parents ended up suing the school. I don't know what happened. What it made like international news, and I'm like, this is crazy.
Conformity.
Having to go so far to conform that you were not even allowed to keep your natural hair color and destroy your own skin and your own health for conformity.
Yeah, conformity is a big thing in Japan, and as opposed to America, as an example. I mean, America literally exists.
It's super individualist.
America literally exists because people went against the status quo. Like that's how the whole independence war started, and it still lives on as a kind of mindset of many Americans. And I think that not only that, America is a huge hodgepodge of different cultures coming together as well. So that creates a lot more different views on society, and also friction between different cultures and the government. The government isn't all usually seen as the good guys, the guys that will protect us, but more often than not, they're just as sometimes detestable and the bad guys as, I don't know, the more stereotypical bad guys in show, terrorists, yeah, that kind of stuff, criminals, I don't know. So the people from America that will be creating shows will take those kinds of ideas with them a lot easier, a lot more. I definitely believe this is a cultural difference between America and Japan, or the Western world and Japan, and how people grow up in either of these societies.
Yeah, that was like one of the things with, Hiroaka. When that first came out, everybody was like, oh yeah, like this is so interesting because you have like all of these people that have obviously been wronged, by the government. And this is going to be a really big theme, but like, no, it's really not. In the end, like the villains are still villains and, the heroes are still all on the side of justice. I remember in season 2, one of the things that really, really pissed me off about the show, and this is coming from someone who really loves, at the very least, the first 3 seasons of My Hero Academia. Like, I adore those. That scene after they fight Stain, right? And they're in the hospital, and the police officer tells them off, right? And like somebody has to take responsibility for, these people who are not allowed to use their powers in public, using their powers in public to hurt someone, aka Stain. And I'm like, okay, then according to the law, what were they supposed to do? Like, were they supposed to just sit there and let themselves get killed? Was that the right decision to make? Is that what you're telling us here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like...
Like, if the law literally tells you that you should rather die than to do something that is against the law, or against the very superficial law, then there is something very, very, very wrong with the law.
And I feel like the author of My Hero Academia, and I think I've said this before in the podcast, does way too little with this problem where there isn't enough nuance between the good and the bad in the good and the bad side in My Hero Academia. The good side is always
good. It's not just My Hero Academia.
And the bad side is always bad. Even
it's not just My Hero Academia.
Just as an example. But yes, it is very prevalent in especially in anime. I mean, I guess in America there's enough shows that have a similar thing, but there's a lot of different shows to balance that out.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing I wanted to talk about, where you can kind of see like the cultural shift in the, like, this is kind of anecdotal, but you can see with there's like as the culture shifts in the US, like slightly before there is like a shift in television. So I think a good example is like MASH, where MASH came out at in Nixon era United States, and the whole thing of it is just making fun of the military. Like, that's the show, and for years it was the most popular show on television. In the most conservative that some of the US has been in like the last 50 years. The most popular show is an anti-war show. Like, I think that just like even in a society where this idea is like frowned upon, you can have stuff break through, and I think eventually, because like even with anime, we have stuff like Horror Musco, where it's very much about like self-expression and like sexuality and stuff like that. But that show's like got a cult following, but it's not that popular. I think eventually we will have a show that breaks through and is like very much like a MASH equivalent.
Yeah, just to show where the good guys are the ones trying to, change something. They don't necessarily have to be like, the Hunger Games were tearing down the government type of thing, but even just somebody who is like, basically a Zuzaku, but, done right from Code Geass.
Yeah, Code Geass is another one like... I guess Code Geass somewhat counts.
Yeah, I think...
Yeah, but I don't know if Code Geass counts exactly, because they're kind of trying to take down, the Britannian Empire.
Yeah.
And, like, hailing Japan.
Yeah, they're trying to...
Japanese and the old Japanese.
They're trying to... They're trying to return to the Japanese glorious standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even, like, that's even something that I noticed in Dr. fucking Stone, right? It's like, the good guy, Senku, wants to return things exactly back to the way they were. And the bad guy, Tsukasa, is the one who wants to make things better. Now, to be fair, Tsukasa's way of making things better isn't exactly, it's kind of like Black Panther and Killmonger all over again. But, you could take some... If you had any nuance at all, Senku would have taken at least some
but
kind
I think
of,
that's more about Senku's, like, flaw, is that all Senku wants is for people to be happy. And from his perspective, the way the world was before, people were happy. So as far as he's concerned.
But Senku is too smart to not understand that people at the time weren't happy and that there were a lot of problems worldwide. That's just bullshit. And it just comes to show that, how little nuance there is in that show. Like, yeah, the science is great. But politics-wise, it's like, you have a chance to completely and utterly restart, and you want things to go back to exactly the way they were before. You can't think of even just one tiny little thing. Like, for example, racism.
Yeah, I think there is specifically a line of dialogue where he says something to the effect of, "I'm not a politician, I am a scientist." But that's just so
ridiculous. Like, scientists have no ethics.
Yeah.
Well, okay, they do have ethics, but they also don't have ethics. Like, Jon Stewart, when Stephen Colbert returned, like Stephen Colbert for like a week or so from The Late Show has been back in the theater, and his first guest has been Jon Stewart, right? And one of the jokes that Jon Stewart made is, the end of the world is probably going to be a scientist finishing his experiment and going, oh, it worked. That's gonna be the end of the world, right? And yeah, I believe that. That would be a very fitting end of the world, because that's how scientists work. They don't think, many of them don't think about should they do it. They're too much preoccupied with the idea of can they do it. So Senku having this very, very strong moral code, but then
does he?
Deliberately going against taking any political stance, and politics and morals are very much intertwined, is kind of a problem.
I mean, it's a Shonen Jump show. I don't think we can expect a in-depth commentary on racism in Shonen Jump. I don't think there's any Shonen Jump series that has done that before. Maybe in the future. Maybe it should do that, but it hasn't done that.
I am very much... Okay, now that you said that, I really, really want to prove you wrong.
Yeah,
because I'm 100% certain there has been at least one Shonen Jump show that did that.
Do prove me wrong. I mean, in depth, like, of course, there's always sometimes we are all the same, we are all people, racism bad, that kind of stuff, of course. But like an in-depth kind of commentary.
Full Metal Alchemist.
I mean, Full Metal Alchemist is technically not Shonen Jump.
Yes,
Slime is kind of like that, to be honest. Like
Slime.
But Slime is light novel.
Yeah, but I mean, potato.
I'm pretty sure the Full Metal Alchemist was going in Shonen Jump, wasn't it?
Magazine. I think it was the other one. Full Metal Alchemist is one of the only ones that wasn't. Yeah, it was serialized. Serialized in Square Enix's monthly Shonen Gangan, so it's not Shonen Jump. Like, I'm not saying there are no manga that offer an in-depth commentary on racism or other similar issues. Though I feel like, especially due to the fact that Japan still very much is a big Japanese society, and there's a lot less culturally diversity compared to other countries. Especially racism is an issue that in anime is very unlikely to be brought up because
I mean, I gave racism as an example, but that's not the only issue out
of
there.
course,
By far not.
sexism is something that also could be talked about more, I guess. And I don't know. There's the LGBTQI
I think
issues.
Oh, you know which one talked a lot about racism? Like a lot. Like to a degree that I was honestly positively surprised because most Western show don't talk about racism that much.
Tell me.
Black fucking Clover.
Is it? Oh.
Black Clover has one of the best takes on racism.
Well,
that I have seen in a long time.
I can't even prove you wrong because I haven't seen it. So you have proven me wrong on the Shonen Jump front. Well done.
Yep.
Congratulations, QD.
I'm just looking through if there's anything else.
Black Clover.
Think about it now. Like, if there is an issue that shows like to tackle, and as somebody who watches all seasonals, I get this impression, is that very often the show, the thing they choose to tackle is like sexuality. That's like the big one. And I wonder if that's to do with people feel the impact of being so like collectivist and not being given the room to be an individual.
To be themselves, to be individuals. And it starts all the way down at, at the school level. And like the stories that I hear from, like the only time apparently in their lives when people in Japan have any chance to express themselves at all is during college. And I've heard or heard of, like YouTubers, teachers, who, give statements on how sad it is that, they see all of these fun, life-loving, students when it comes to application time becoming clones of one another. And, in school in general, like, we've talked about the school life where, everybody has to look the same to the point of where they force a girl to dye her natural hair. If I had gone to school in Japan, I would have had to get a certificate from the doctor that my hair has always been this curly. Otherwise, I would have to straighten it. That's how ridiculous it is. So yeah, there is absolutely no way to express themselves, or very, very, like the society gives you very little room to express yourself in Japan.
Yeah, and I think because of this, because this is a very big issue in Japan, shows are much more likely to be about this issue because it lives there in Japan.
Yeah.
Whereas racism, much less. Sexism
is also kind of just ignored, sadly.
Yeah, even though it is very much a big issue
it still
in
makes
Japan.
Me so mad that, so many shoujo anime or shoujo shows or manga in general are all about, relationships, and there's nothing outside of that, just, getting a boyfriend and eventually getting married. Like, there's nothing wrong with thinking or feeling that way or wanting that, but if the vast, vast, vast majority of the entertainment you publish has, a main character with that goal, and nothing else than that goal, or even if they don't have that goal, ending up that way and living that life, and it's all about relationship and relationship drama, and you barely even know anything of the characters outside of their relationship, that is a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like it's sometimes I find it very weird the focus that some characters have, like to marry the girl, like not just get the girl but marry the girl.
Yeah, because in Japan you're still like there's still to this day the expectation that, a woman is to be married at 24. I told you about the Christmas cake problem. Do you remember the Christmas cake problem? That women are generally called or referred to as Christmas cakes because nobody wants them after the 25th.
Oh, yes. Yes, right. You did say that. I do remember now. Yeah, that is an issue that they
really
should. That could definitely be handled more. And I feel like the few times where Shonen Jump shows or manga try to dip into that, to like the female empowerment, it either feels like the author doesn't understand the issues it feels forced, or it just feels like he's completely missing the point.
I mean, there was one author, I remember, I think it was the author of Naruto, Kishimoto, who literally said that because he doesn't understand women, he doesn't want to write female characters. Like, that's just bullshit.
It is. And that's also, this is something that we've said before, this is also why female characters written by female authors feel a lot more like actual characters, and feel like you can be more attached to them as a character rather than a girl or a woman that any particular male author might write. Because
the hilarity of it is, even in many cases, these characters aren't interested in changing the status quo.
nope, it's just kind of accepted that this is the way it's supposed to be. And yeah, like, even Fullmetal Alchemist, for example, has some tinges of changing the status quo, but it is obvious that, how do I say this? The government, they are going against the government, but the government is trying to change the status quo to serve their own needs, even though the status quo was...
Yeah,
it's a little bit more nuanced, but I don't think a Fullmetal Alchemist counts towards
taking down and changing things for the better. I mean, in Fullmetal Alchemist, it's really just, it's very much of the Hunger Games problem of, the main characters being caught in the middle of this conflict that is much bigger than them. It just so happens that, the conflict in the Hunger Games is all about, taking down the oppressive government, and in Fullmetal Alchemist, it's really more... well, everything that Fullmetal Alchemist is.
Yeah, it's a little difficult to shove Fullmetal Alchemist in a box and just fit it somewhere in this analogy that we've come up with like the one side and the other side. Because yes, the government is evil and they created the status quo, but at the same time, for most people living in Amestris, the status quo is pretty good. And then all of a sudden, the master plan that the evil government came up with to change the status quo into something that they truly desired, it is bad for people. So in a way, yeah, the main characters are protecting the peaceful status quo. It's a little different. It's difficult.
Yeah, but I think that's people feel that way though. Like even in I'm sure that there are most people in Japan feel pretty good about the way it is.
I think so too. I think they're very used to it. Just for example, just like any random white person in America feels a lot less concerned about the racism issue in their country
but they have other concerns
than any
that
black
they do,
person
that they want the government to change.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, now I don't know how true this is. So if anybody there has like first-hand experiences, please feel free to correct me. But from what I understand is that one of the YouTubers that I watched, he has lived in America for a few years, and one of the things that he understood is just, how brainwashed the Japanese people are, because they are very much, from the very early on conditioned to never question anything that the government does.
Yeah.
So there's that
like,
too.
So
they're not going to be unhappy about things because they're like, yeah, look how, they're very much conditioned to, our country is the best, we don't have any problems, look at these awful foreigners, and like the government is doing everything for you and is always right and all that.
Yeah, there's the incredible statistic of almost all court cases just being convictions, because that's how the system works. If you get arrested, if you go to court, you will be found guilty.
Even if you're not.
Even if you're not. Oh, and that makes me think Ace Attorney is probably also one of those in the list.
Yes, but Ace Attorney is first of all, Ace Attorney is a video game. Second of all,
it has an anime.
Yeah, it does.
It has an
and
anime.
It's
terrible.
just as much based on the American legal system as it is on the Japanese legal system. It's a mix of both.
Yeah, and indeed, it is very much a going against the system, trying to change, and they do. They actually change in the games. They eventually manage to change the system into a more democratic one, where there's actually a larger jury rather than one guy trying to decide things. It's still a very funny concept where an attorney gets a case and he has to prepare for it within 3 days, and then it's all over. Like 3 days is all he gets.
That's
Impossible.
That's just absurd.
That's
just
okay,
absurd.
okay.
Gets
Yeah.
3
You
days.
know
That would
what?
never happen.
I found a jump title. I actually did find a jump title where the main characters go against and manage to change the status quo. On a very small scale, but they manage. Bakuman.
I haven't seen enough of it to really be able to say yes or no. I will believe you.
Am I allowed to spoil?
Yeah.
Okay, so the thing...
Is that the one with the manga, or is it the one with the little girl?
The manga.
Okay.
The one with the little girl is called Barakamon.
Okay. Yeah, they're just so similar sounding.
Speedy?
Yeah,
Yes or no?
you I'm not interested in it enough that I will probably watch it ever. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so the thing about Bakuman is the two main characters, like the writer and the artist, are very much, from very early on, considered, problem childrens in Jump, right? Because they always want to go against the things that Jump, the head people at Jump kind of decide, right? And, they constantly cause trouble. They constantly, cause an uproar. They constantly go against decisions. Like, they are told, no, they are not allowed to end their title. And then they're like, fuck you, we're ending our title because we don't like it. We were forced into this. We don't want to do it. Right? And one of the things that they go against was, their version of Death Note, because it's the same authors of Death Note, was not allowed to end because, as you know, in Jump, everything that is successful is designed to go on forever, right? Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to go on forever. And so there's this rumor actually going about, I don't know how true it is, that is basically their analogy for, we wanted to, the original authors wanted to end Death Note with the death of Kira and L, dying at the same time, but weren't allowed to because Jump told them the manga had to go on. And what happened in Bakuman is actually what they wanted to do, meaning to end it with, the two opponents defeating one another. Light and dark, Kira and Light, and so on and so forth. Kira and L, Light and Laliet. And going against the status quo, telling them, no, you can't force us to make this go on forever. This is not a story to go on forever. If we do that, you're going to kill our story, diminish our story. And for a while, that's exactly what happens. They slow down the pace so that they can make it run longer. And that, makes it drop, makes the viewership drop. And the executives are still very much, no, you're not allowed to end this. This is too popular for it to end, right? Mm. And then they're like, fuck you, we're going to end this. And that does actually change, the Shonen Jump formula a little bit of, okay, if it has a good ending, we are going to allow a show to end. And you kind of see that happening because nowadays, a lot of Shonen Jump titles actually end. After less than 100 chapters. So, not only do I have a feeling that, Bakuman in and of itself, telling that story kind of, forced what Jump was doing to the authors to the light, but also that, just the success of Death Note and the success of Death Note's ending was such a big hit that it actually, in real life, did change Jump. So, this is a story of two people going against the status quo. Even if the status quo is just, that one company and their policies, and changing it for the better.
Huh. Yeah, that's yeah, I agree.
But I can't think of anything else. No, not off the top of my head. Maybe some of the older ones would, but none of I can think of so far.
At that point, it's from a different age, different...
Yeah, there's that too. Different
generation. I don't know how Japan has changed, whether it's become more or less conformed these days.
I have a feeling it became... Yeah. I don't know if it became more or less conformative, but it definitely became less critical. There's less critical thinking going on. At least in manga and anime.
Yeah, because with a lot of the stuff from the 70s and 80s, the people who worked on the shows lived through World War II.
Yeah, there's that.
So
too.
they have a lot. They have a lot to say about the way the world works, right? But if somebody was born in 1990, well, they would have gone through an economic crisis, but they haven't had a struggle nearly as much, so they probably just have less motivation to speak
Yeah,
up. In
and
general.
both in all of Osamu Tezuka's work, that living through World War II is definitely like a big issue. But the thing is, like a lot of the people in the 80s, it's not so much that they lived through World War II, it's that they lived through the atomic testing after World War II in their oceanic backyard.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about this when I touched upon Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
because I think like 20-30 years or so, even after World War II, I think it took 10 plus years until like America even allowed Japan to talk about the atomic bomb, and the atomic bombing. And even after that, they continued to do atomic tests in and around Japan, with atomic bombs. And so all the way into the 80s, there was still this fear, this anxiety, and this incapability of really dealing with that trauma that went to people who at the time had been children when it happened, but also the people who never had it happen and just grew up in that anxiety, not really knowing where it comes from, not really having experienced where it comes from, what the origins of it were, just growing up, just like how in Naruto, the kids automatically adopt the parents' resentments to Naruto and their fear of him. Same way the children growing up or being born in the 60s, 70s automatically adopting the anxiety and fear of their parents.
I do think though that while Japan itself might become, from the inside, is becoming more conformative, from the outside there is an increasing pressure from the rest of the world trying to
Fuck no, it's
trying
not.
to, I mean, with the whole globalization, the increased interest in Japanese culture over the last 20-30 years.
Yeah, but Japan has the entirety of the world by its balls.
Right now, yeah, but
No, not right now. Literally, Japan. It's not China. Like most people think that the people holding the country holding the most debt, especially over America and the Western world, is China. Fuck no, it's Japan. Japan is the world who has the entirety of the world's economy in the palms of their hand. I think, if I remember correctly, it was about 2/3 of the world's debt is owned by Japan.
that sounds massive. That sounds like a lot.
Most people don't know that. Most people think it's China. It's not China, guys. It's Japan.
Well, as somewhere it makes sense, because rather than a rival, Japan and America are at least culturally allies, I guess. Somewhat.
I mean, the Japanese really don't like the Americans really don't like the Japanese too much yet. They still remember Pearl Harbor pretty
Yeah.
well.
The Western world, then, rather. Like,
I mean, Germany likes Japan. Japan likes Germany. Germany doesn't really care about Japan.
all the German names. Like, they really do have a thing for doing German names, which comes back around to, and this is the last thing I'll probably say, but, like, it's really funny when Asuka in Neon Genesis Evangelion was speaking German.
When she talks German.
Oh god, that was terrible. Terrible. Oh man, I hated that so much.
There was something that I watched not too long ago where somebody talked German where I was like, no. Oh yeah, Fate Stay Night. Like the magic in
Oh
Fate
yeah,
Stay
they do
Night
that
is
too.
German.
They do that there
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, but what's even worse is the French. Like when I watched Kaguya-sama, and like in this one episode where she had to talk French, like my French at this point is fairly fluid. I didn't understand shit of what she said.
Even Pory can relate because the Japanese English is also horrible most of the time.
English. Oh. I found out not too long ago that if you want to have like an English a job where you speak English in Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they test your English skills, you cannot talk English. You have to talk English. you have to talk like this.
Because
Otherwise, they're like, yeah. Otherwise, they have no idea what you're saying.
yeah, that's actually something that they said on the Trash Taste podcast as well, where they usually they usually people understand it more easily. No, it's not on the Trash Taste podcast. Someone said that it was if you're trying to talk to Japanese people in English, it is better to speak in a very cartoonish Italian accent if you don't know what Japanese. Yes, because
accent.
Italians also like to. It's a me, Mario. See, there's always the vowel.
Oh, so in what people think in Italian.
Yes, yeah, a
accents.
cartoonish, like try to talk like Mario. That's what the guy said, and it kind of makes sense because, yeah, that is kind of a little bit what the Japanese do too. They add a lot of sounds after the English words because that's just how usually their language works.
How the language is
Yeah.
put together. You never have you always have a vowel following a consonant unless there's
Exactly.
an in it.
It probably also has to do with the fact that they're like so hegemonous.
Yeah.
That word. Yeah. That they like a lot of people have just never met an Italian person, so they'll have no idea what they sound like.
I'm
So they
pretty
just have
sure
to-
that most people in Japan, unless they live in Tokyo, Kyoto, have never
Exactly.
met a foreigner.
They-
Period.
Exactly. So they have to just guess.
That's kind of sad. Like even
It
in
is,
Ghost in the Shell, like in the Ghost in the Shell movie, one of the things that the Major literally says is, like one of the guys, the only one with like a full human body, still asks them, like, hey Major, why did you bring somebody like me into the team? And she's like, because you're different from us. And if everyone's the same, the system starts to have the system starts to have faults and programs. Diversity makes us stronger. And I'm like, guys, people in Japan, Ghost in the Shell is like one of the favorite things in Japan, next to maybe Atom or Astro Boy and Neon Genesis Evangelion. How can you watch this movie and still think that your heteronymous country is
Olivier Mira Armstrong
when the Major literally
also said this, by the way.
the Major. I wonder why. Probably because somebody watched fucking Ghost in the Shell. Like when the Major literally says that, diversity makes us stronger. And it's true. All of the great civilizations in the world, every single one of them, no exceptions anywhere, have been very diverse.
Culturally.
Yeah, culturally. I mean, yeah, if you go to like Egypt, you have Alexandria. Alexandria was racially one of the most diverse places in the world, more so than the US is today. Same with Rome. Rome was super diverse racially. But even things like, the big Chinese empire was very diverse in terms of, maybe not so much in terms of race, because, it was mostly Asian, but very diverse in terms of cultures, in terms of religions, in terms of influences, in terms of trading, right? In terms of things such as architecture, governments, philosophies, all of the big cultures and cultural hotspots in the world have always been really, really, really diverse.
Yeah, and the reason that China has so many languages, dialects, rather, is because China is a hodgepodge of different Asian cultures just within its own borders. Because it used to not always be China. Like sometimes it was that, and sometimes it wasn't. Usually it was a lot of different kinds of countries that all had their own cultures, and from that is born a mega nation right now.
And China, you wouldn't believe it, actually has a lot of influence from African culture, because it was trading a lot with Africa,
And is
especially
still
East Africa, so just the Seychelles and
is
Ethiopia.
still doing so. China is
Yeah.
very much intent on spreading a lot of its own influence over Africa right now, geopolitically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But most Chinese people actually don't know how much influence they have from Africa. Back before colonialization, when places such as Egypt, Ethiopia, the Seychelles, all of these were huge, really, really, really rich, strong kingdoms that were at times stronger even than the Chinese empires were. That did so much trade and brought so much of their culture to Asia.
Mm-hmm. But we've strayed very far for anime, and it's also getting quite late. So I think this is a good point to just cut it off, so to speak.
So one more quick question. Have we actually found anime or an anime where the heroes are literally the ones trying to topple the status quo, aside from Bakuman?
Well, there's like Psychopaths, but that's like fixing it. That's not trying to topple it. That's like saying we're close, but we need to do this and this and this to fix
Okay, I
it.
haven't watched Psychopath. It's literally the next one on my list, but I haven't watched it yet.
Psychopaths is really good.
There is
I've heard so.
one, Zankyo no Terror, but the anime very much makes the viewer empathize with the main characters, but in this version of Tokyo, the main characters are most definitely terrorists. So there's that. But they have their own reasons for doing what they do.
But are they the heroes? Like, not are they the protagonists? Are they the heroes? Are they the good guys?
I'd have to watch it again. From what I kind of remember, they're more like anti-heroes. They're morally grey characters that, for a particular goal, they've been kind of really hurt by society, that the society that they live in, and so they kind of have a whole thing where they do terrorism in order to further their own goals. It's a little weird.
Okay, so it's more of a Doro and Hyakimaru situation then, rather than a Katniss Everdeen situation.
Yeah, they're not good guys, so to speak.
Because, like, I know I keep going back to the Hunger Games, but that's really because it's the most prominent example. Katniss Everdeen is, like, very much the hero of the story, and the government is very much the villain.
But yeah, I don't think there's an anime quite like that. Not so starkly. The good guys are trying to topple the government. But yeah. Next time is the last episode, and I don't really know what to talk about. Anime cannibalism, maybe. But we've talked about that before. It's just one of those episodes that never made it to the finished stages. But maybe we can talk. We'll come up with something. But
Cool, we're almost there.
It's finally done.
This podcast is only going to go to episode 10,
Yep.
so next episode really is going to be the last
Yep.
one. Who knows? Maybe if Speedy can get his work ethics in order,
No.
and will one of these days
No.
maybe grapple himself.
No.
No. Not on a project that
What a fucking hero.
for the most part don't like. I like the talking, but literally everything else I don't like. So it's a.
What did you think this was going to be?
I didn't know.
Did you really think it was going to be just talking?
Before I.
Why have they not automated this stuff yet? Come on.
Started
Unbelievable.
this, I didn't know how audio editing was, whether I would like it or not. I tried it. I made a project out of it, and it turns out I don't like audio editing. So we ended there.
Well, I mean, you seem to like it on smaller projects. It's just the big ones you don't like it on. Not yet. Maybe you'll get there.
I don't like it working on monotonous, large projects that take me like 4, 5, 6 hours of work with very little progress showing every single step of the way, and having to redo things. And then also there's the fact that not everything is perfect. I literally.
You mean like literally every production?
I literally cannot.
Of anything
I literally
ever?
cannot make it perfect. For one, because especially your mic is sometimes the thing that annoys me most. Like, God.
Yeah,
it's
Sheila, it's
all
your
your
fault.
Sheila.
But
It's all your fault.
I never hear it. I never hear it on the recordings.
It's all. I mean, it's always a little background noise that I hear on yours, but not on mine. Sometimes there's people talking in Pory's background. I don't know. That doesn't matter, because in the end, this is a project where we were supposed to have fun, and the talking is fun. So I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that.
Well, now maybe you have a little more appreciation for, the creation of anything that you enjoy.
Maybe a little more, yeah.
Because this here is child's play in comparison to
I know.
most any other production out there.
I know. But that's it for me. I actually have to sleep soon. So
Then go to sleep. Time to go.
GM.
So until that last time, bye bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.